Welcome back to Brotherhood and Banter, and my name is Joey, and I have my friend here. This is Jason White. So also you can see it's just me today. I don't have my other Brotherhood guys. Jake is on the road, and Mark is not feeling too well today. So it's just me. Jason, you have only me today.
All right.
So welcome, Jason. So before we get started, I'm gonna give you tell you a little bit about Jason. Actually, I'm gonna go back. I met Jason for the first time, I think 3 years ago. We went on a visit, on a bishopric visit, and so I never met him before, and that was the first time I met him. And we were at his house for an hour, a little over an hour. We got to know Jason. We got to hang out. And as we left, I really liked being friends with Jason.
Oh, thank you.
And Jason is a member of the Greenville Third Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Greenville is part of our stake. And Jason was born a member of the church. He owns a trucking company. And even though he was born a member of the church, Jason is the first person I invited that was born a member, but I still wanted him to share his conversion story. And again, I say every time everyone has a unique story, and it is unique. So Jason too is a unique story. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to have you start from where did you grow up and then take it from there.
Yeah, really, life started out for us in the Wills Point Ward when I was young. That's the first place I remember going to church. My family were one of the original 3 members to start that branch back in the 70s, I suppose. And then it grew all the way to a ward by the time we left. And roundabout this way and that, we ended up in Greenville, I guess about the time, I think around 9 or 10 years old, and I've been there ever since. So that's kind of how church life started for me early on, was, again, the Wills Point Ward. But as long as I've been in Greenville now, it's home. It's home in so many different ways that there can't be any other home besides Greenville.
And also, get this, okay, just for a little plug for next week, Jason said that they moved to Greenville, right? So he was born in a church, but his parents were converts, right, Jason?
Well, my mom was. My dad was born. My dad was born to parents that were members. They were converts.
Okay.
And my mom, when she met my dad, she converted at that point as well.
Okay.
And so
and next week we're gonna have your parents on. We have Jason's parents, the Whites, coming on next week. So stay tuned. There's gonna be a continuation here.
Yeah. A lot of history.
Yeah. So Jason, like I said, I brought you on. You were born a member of the church. I'm having you share your conversion story. And I'll also preface this, I'll say this, right? I know that even though, me included, I was born and raised a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but at some point in my life, I had to be converted to the church, right? And so that's the main reason why I wanted Jason to come. When he shared with us, when he shared with me his story, I was very intrigued. And so I asked if he would share it with our listeners, and he said he would.
Yeah, so, growing up, primary, young men's, all the way into I really think it was probably late teens, early 20s area, probably early 20s area. Was always an active member. I grew up all through Scouts, went through all the whole scouting program and enjoyed every bit of that, went through young men's and really enjoyed church life growing up, was always an active member. And, often, I guess, sometimes when we're young, we're not always the wisest people in the world, right? And so through some situations,
because I was always the wise guy. I was always wise.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is we think we know, right? We think we know. But, so got into a dispute of sorts with the bishop at the time, and just said, you know what, I'm just not coming back. young and immature and hot-headed, I guess. And so, and I really didn't intend for it to stay that way. But it did. And, a week or two went by and no one called. And I thought, well, that's weird. Cause I mean, I was in the elders quorum presidency at the time, and a month went by, no call. 6 months went by, no call. Somewhere between 6 months and a year, I finally said, well, nobody's even going to reach out. Well, I'm out of here, And looking back on it now, I laugh a little bit at it because it's just so foolish and just silly to me of, such a little reason to make such a major life choice, but I did. And I say major life choice because it was, okay, because ultimately I spent probably the next, 15, 16 years inactive,
Wow.
what never meant to, it was never meant to be that at all, but it ended up that way. And, although during the whole time, my feelings and my opinion of the church and the gospel never changed. I still held in such high regards as I always had. I just fell into inactivity. I don't know how else to describe it, but I fell into inactivity, and it's because it's something you got to work your way up out of, and it's hard. And again, it was 16 years, and it wasn't even necessarily for me. Just a thought out process that, maybe I should go back to church or whatever. It was more of a major interruption in my life that come out of nowhere, unexpected, unwarranted, but it literally just landed me on my ear, and I had to completely reevaluate everything about life at that point, and I ended up in a pretty unique situation that was kind of dark, really, as far as mentally and spiritually. And that I think that moment was the scariest moment for me, where, as you say, you get to a T in the road, and you think to yourself, I got to go right or I got to go left. I know what going to this direction feels like, and I don't want anything to do with that. That's so dark and scary. In fact, the only thing I know to do because of how dark and scary that feels is to fall to my knees and pray. And that's something I had gotten away from, 16, 17 years inactive, whatever it was. I, just hadn't been, I hadn't really been living the same life that I had prior to inactivity. And it just, all the things that you grow up, you learn, and you do that become a part of you slowly fade away, whether it was being led by the Spirit. I like to think that, that was a moment when maybe I was being reached out to. The Lord was reaching out to me again at that point. And I needed that.
I agree.
I needed it badly
agree.
at that point. Yeah.
I agree, because I think that the Lord is always trying to reach out to us. And at some point, when we stop and think, or when we stop and feel, we begin to feel the inklings of the Holy Spirit. That's I feel that. And it's so interesting to me, Jason, to hear you says you grew up in the church, born and raised. You knew all those things, right? Pray, read the scriptures, but yet the three things that I noticed is, yet number one, when you fell out of activity, those things went away. And then number two, you went the first time after 1 week, after 2 weeks, and no one called, no one reached out. You're like, well, they don't need me. They don't want me. You get those feelings. And then number three, it just, this is my interpretation. You didn't say this, but it gets easier to go the other direction.
Absolutely. In fact, I would go even as far as to say, not only does it get easier, but you can easily say that you're being led that direction as well.
Oh.
You're right. Satan's always looking for his way, right? And it's, when he's doing his work, it's not always blatant, black and white, clear that that's what's going on. Sometimes it's as friendly and comfortable as you could imagine. And I say that in a way that it's like a voice saying, hey, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. Just, it's not a big deal, So when I say it's not as spiritually dark feeling or anything like that. I think oftentimes people underestimate or forget who he was on the other side of the veil. as Lucifer, and the power he held and the status he held prior to being cast out of heaven. He's not just this guy's,
Yeah,
I would say, he was in the inner circle of inner circles,
yeah,
right? So,
he was. He
and he
was.
didn't lose the knowledge and the tools and the skills that he had, right? In fact, he took all that with him. And so when we give Satan an opportunity, it's not always something that you would think is something. I guess what I'm trying to say, it's not always sin or sinful actions or anything like that he uses to lure you away. Sometimes it's an opportunity, like a silly decision, or whatever you'll call it, immature decision I'm not going back to church. And that was his opening to start whispering in the ear, hey, it's okay. It's all right.
No one needs
good,
you. Look at that. They didn't call you. Look at that. They don't care about you. Don't worry. Yeah. You're so right. He whispers all these little things into our ears.
And so, and like I said, it's not, when I said it's almost, it's comforting and friendly, it's because that's the approach he takes to you. He, that's that little buddy on that shoulder going, no, let's go this way instead. When all your life, everything has taught you that you need to keep praying, you need to keep reading the scriptures, you need to do this, and everything you've always done. But it's a real subtle voice over here that's friendly and kind to say, no, it's okay, man. Let's just, don't worry about it today. It's all right, and that's his way of getting you away. And the further you go in time away from doing those things, and the more you get away from the habit of reading the scriptures daily and praying and stuff like that, the more he leads you away from it. And the more you're away from it, the easier it gets to just move further and further away. So, yeah.
Jason, I want to touch on something as well. So we had the missionaries over that we were helping one of their friends. This is last week, Friday or Thursday, I think. And we were working with them to teach her the gospel. And before she left, we helped her recognize the spirit. And we said, the spirit is not going to come and shake a tree and flash the lights on and off and say, oh, you can't do this, or you got to do this. So it's going to be that very friendly, familiar voice. Sometimes it's through regular activity. Because we said to her, the adversary does not want you to know the truth. He does not want you to join the church. And he's going to do things that are familiar. It could be, the adversary could be someone just saying to you, hey, let's go to dinner instead of doing your reading, or let's go hang out here instead of going with the missionary. It's just that little familiar, I'm going to use your word, friendly voice.
That little shift in momentum.
Yeah.
To the left or to the right, right?
Yeah. I love it.
Those little shifts, they're little at the time, but the further you go on that direction, the further off of the heading you end up in the end.
Agreed. So, okay. Yeah. All right.
So yeah, I got to that point where it was time to, a rider left in the road, and so I just hit the knees and prayed, and it led me to a good friend of mine that I grew up with in the Greenville ward. He's my scoutmaster, my bishop, state president, and a lifelong dear friend of mine, Ed Thatcher. He was a part of that time in my life that I was going through all that, and he refers to it often as a refiner's fire I went through. And so, and in that moment, I remember him telling me all the time, Jason, you're not gonna believe me right now. You're gonna laugh at me. You're gonna think I'm crazy, but there's gonna come a time you're gonna look back on this moment, on this time, this situation you're going through, with great gratitude for the growth you're gonna gain out of it. And at the time, I was just like, Ed, you're nuts. There's no way. I can't believe you even say that. But I have multiple times since then, with a swelling heart and tears in my eyes, agreed with him that was a moment in which it turned my life around, and truly went through that refiner's fire. It offered me and afforded me a situation unique to where I was able to study the scriptures as I've never done before. I growing up in seminary and scripture mastery, and year after year of seminary and stuff like that, you think you know the gospel pretty well, and And even into my early 20s in the elders quorum, reading and studying and sharing with others and stuff like that, you think you know it pretty well, but no. I look back then, I don't feel like I knew anything then really, but now, having gone through and I mean, during this time period I went through, I read the Bible. Well, I read my quad from Genesis 1 all the way through the end of the Pearl of Great Price 3 times in a row. And the third time, I read every scripture reference along the way, front to back,
Wow.
cover to cover. And it took a long time. And I'd like to say now that because of all that, my knowledge of the gospel is quite a bit larger, but more importantly, and thing I'm most grateful for is my testimony is absolutely unshakable.
Wow.
Absolutely
I
unshakable.
love it. I love it. Okay, I have another question then. You were born and raised in the church. You left, even though it was a weird circumstance. You just said, "I'm not going to come." It was. I'll say you were offended, right?
Yeah.
But now you're back. But why? Why come back? And here's why. Let me explain what I'm asking. Why I'm asking this. It's much easier to live a different way because many people have said to me, "Your church," and I say many. I have friends that are not members of the church, which is fine. They say your church has too many rules, and they'll point to you can't drink coffee, you can't drink
Yeah.
tea. What is wrong with that? You can't drink a beer, just a little cold one. People have said these to me, and you can't move in with your girlfriend. All these little things, no sex before marriage. It's much easier, Jason, to live. And I'm not implying you did that. I'm just saying it's much easier to live these things, right?
It
But
is.
why come back when it's much easier to live the other way?
And it wasn't until after I had gone through this situation I had to go through that I did come back to full activity, but it was after all the time that I had to study the gospel the way I did. And I had some precepts, pre-known understandings from growing up in the church, from primary all the way through. And I guess really the easiest way to say it is that after having read the gospel and I studied the gospel, didn't read it, I studied it. And having done so, the truths held within. Well, really, Joey, honestly, the thing I think that got me the most about it was that I found so much of the gospel that we hold to be true through the restoration of the church and the Book of Mormon. So many of those truths that we hold, I found plainly evident in the Bible as well. And it was that realization that the Book of Mormon and the Holy Bible truly go hand in hand, teaching the same gospel, principle for principle. Okay. And that was the point where I was like, okay, this is truly the Lord's church, because, all of the information we've been given after the restoration, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, all of the teachings and leadings from living prophets, it all aligned with the Bible so clearly to me that there was no other answer. There was no other why come back. It was because it's the Lord's church. Where else would I be, right? I mean, and I guess just having come to that and through that situation, and again, during this entire situation I was going through, it became a quick change in my life where every day was full of prayer, and started with reading the scriptures and other books as well that I've become a huge Talmage fan, although hard to read, but what you get out of it's incredible. But I read a lot of other books along the way, and so it just, for me, it was that shift back into daily prayers and scripture study that kind of aligned me back spiritually where I needed to be, and then just having a knowledge of the gospel the way I did, especially the correlation between the Holy Bible and the Book of Mormon, that there was no other consideration of anywhere else to go. I didn't see there was any. It wasn't even a thought.
I love it. I'm gonna put in a little plug right here. The Come Follow Me that we're to this year. For those who don't know, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is studying the Old Testament this year. And we study different sections of our scriptures every year. And this year we're focusing on the Old Testament. And what you just pointed out, Jason, I'm learning so much about the Old Testament this year, even though we studied it 4 years ago. But I'm learning so much more. And then the other thing I want to point out that I love what you said. It's really those primary answers or the Sunday school answers. Read your scriptures, say your prayers, because I want to say I do the same thing every day, right? And I'm going to add to that and say faith has a short shelf life, and I think that was Elder Bednar that said that 10 years ago.
Isn't that a true statement?
Right? It's just a little thing that you drop. If you don't water your plant, it'll die. And if you don't keep going on your faith, keep putting things towards your testimony, if you're not watering your testimony, your scripture study, it fades, right?
Like
and
they say, you got to exercise your faith.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So true. Okay, so what's next for you? You're back at church because I met you about 3 years ago, and you were beginning your journey. You were actually in the middle of it when I met you. The bishop said, "Let's go visit you," and it was so fun a visit. And I've been seeing you at church, and so I know you mentioned about the temple. So what's next?
Well, that's next. That'll be next going and because again, I left early in my life, and I didn't serve a mission, regretfully, but I didn't, and so I never made it to the temple in my youth to be endowed, and so that's what's next. Okay, there's not a date just yet, but it's as soon as possible. We're there.
Keep going.
For many reasons. My parents are temple workers.
Yeah.
And and that's something that I would love the opportunity to share experiences in the temple with them as they're working in the temple, to be able to witness that firsthand and to be there to see them, putting in such diligent work every week in the temple, but to just be there together with my parents like that.
I love it. Okay, so as we're finishing up, Jason, I have maybe two questions. Number one, and this is referencing back to when he said how you left. Well, I'm going to ask it two different ways. I still have another question. But what would you have done differently, knowing what you know now? I think I already know the answer. And then, okay, answer that first, and then I'll.
Oh, quick! I think if I could go back even to myself, then I'd think, get over yourself. It wasn't that big of an issue, and it certainly wasn't worth all of the years of inactivity and the absence of the Spirit in my life, and I don't even know that I would say necessarily spiritual growth, because I feel like maybe I caught that up somewhat, but yeah, I would never have let something so, what seems now so petty, pushed me to a point of inactivity like that. I would have never have done that. In fact, I think it could have been an easier situation where, it's always easier hindsight looking back, and with the growth and maturity and so forth, the situation could have been, I could have handled it so much different, and it would have changed the course of my life. But I'm not proud of the years of inactivity and living, absent of the gospel and living a life that was, not necessarily in line with gospel principles, not necessarily out of line, but certainly not in line. But, I did get a lot of experience through the last, 20 years or however you would call it. And I think that experience and that knowing what it's like to not only fall away from the church into inactivity, but to not live a life with the church focused and centered in your life has helped me to perhaps connect with others in sharing the gospel to help them kind of to see what I know now.
I agree.
Rock solid to be true. That experience has become a valuable asset to help. And again, and this is something I want to make sure I want to get in here, because this is of the whole experience I went through. I think this was probably the takeaway that stuck with me the most, and it has almost become a mission for me here forward. Okay. Again, talking about Ed Thatcher, he pointed out a statistic to me one time after I had read the Bible through the first time that, only 2 to 4% of Christians across the world I've actually read the Bible in its entirety cover to cover. And even within our own church, the statistic is only slightly higher, like 4 to 6%, right? As I understand it. I don't know if those are how, but it's relatively low. And it's something that, life seems to get in the way for most people. But, there's so many different programs and guides and things out there now that you can choose. Do you want it in 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, however you want to do it? But it all starts with a journey of one day, one time to sit down and start reading and stay with it. The first time I read the Old Testament, I remember it was like looking up at the top of a cliff. I couldn't see a sheer face cliff that I couldn't see the top of and going, how am I ever going to get over this? When in reality, when I got back, when I finished it, I turned and I looked back and I laughed and I said, oh my gosh, it's 5 small parts. That's it. There's 5 small parts. And it becomes so much smaller at that point. So I want to encourage everyone, especially members of the church that have the fullness of the gospel, to learn to read the Bible in its entirety for a couple of reasons. One, when you can teach the principles of the gospel from the Holy Bible, because that's one of the first objections missionaries always come across is well, if it's not in the Holy Bible, I don't believe it. Okay, cool. Let me show you. So when you can learn to teach the gospel principles through the Bible, you open a lot more opportunities for others to want to continue to learn more. Okay. And the other part, this is something I kind of struggled with in a lot of times, that almost feeling like a little bit of a hypocrite if it weren't for the unique situation that I had to go through. I don't know that I would have ever completed the task as well. But having done so, and this is the hypocrite part, is that I don't want anyone else to know what it's going to feel like to stand in front of the Lord one day and have to answer why we didn't read what he gave us. It's not a life's work. It's a short little period of time, and it's so important. It's his word. I don't want anyone to have to know what that's like to stand there and for the Lord to ask them, but why didn't you read my word? Why? There's no reason. There's no answer for that. Wow. And so again, only because of a unique circumstance did I do so. And so I kind of struggle a little bit. Like, I don't want to feel like a hypocrite for saying that just because I have, but at the same time, because I have that experience on the other side, it leads me to want to continue through my life to implore others to do the same. Okay. For one, just to say you've done it so you don't have to stand in front of the Lord and say, sorry, I didn't read your word. I wish I had. But also because we can help move the work along and help others who are perhaps ready to hear the message, but are blocked by, if it's not in the Bible, I don't want to hear it. Well, when you can teach the gospel principles and you can show the things we're teaching in the Book of Mormon in the Bible, it unlocks people to where they're willing to open their minds and their ears and their hearts and move forward. So I want to encourage everyone, read the Bible, read it in its entirety and learn for yourself. Do you see the correlation between the two? Because at the very least, it just strengthens your testimony to know they truly do go hand in hand. It's not just something you say as a talking point. It's something you know.
Love it. Well, you literally answered the other fork I was going to ask you. And then you also, and without even saying it, you shared your testimony. And I want to give a shout out to Ed Thatcher. I know Ed Thatcher as well. He was our stake presidency a few years ago. And I love and appreciate that man. So Ed, shout out to you.
Yeah. That man will always hold a special place in my heart. Yeah, he's been a wonderful mentor. Even through the years I wasn't active, anytime Ed and I ever saw each other, we literally, without sounding cliche of a movie, we almost would run to each other and embrace and a hug every time we see each other. And it's never changed from the time I was a little scout all the way up. We started out, share real quick. Our situation started out with, I think the first scout camp I ever, it was like a local little camp out we had. I got mad at Ed about something and decided I was leaving. I packed up, I struck out, and he literally had to run me down on foot. And when he did, he caught me, and I was kicking and screaming, and he held me there until I quit. And then we had a long talk, and from then on, we've just been locked together like this. And so it's funny to think about now. That's the truth of the story, though. That really is. But since that moment forward, we've been, incredibly close, and I love Ed dearly, and I can't ever appreciate or express my appreciation for him. So, can't express it enough.
I love it, and I'm gonna close with this because as I hear you say these things, just 2 months ago, one of my young men's, I was his young men's leader back in 2009. I ordained him to be a high priest just 2 months ago. He asked me to ordain him to be a high priest because he was called to serve in the bishopric. And that made me feel so good. I share that because I see your relationship with Ed, and I know that's the feeling that Ed has for you. He loves you, and I see you love him, and I can appreciate that, and I know that because I have. But
Joey, I want to add to that real quick. I want to add to that because this is something that if you go back and you look at when I went inactive, I was waiting for the phone call. I was waiting for one of the brothers to call me, go, hey, where you at? We can show that same love, and we can build those same relationships. It doesn't have to be a bishopric and a youth, or
Agreed.
I mean, it doesn't need. It can be a brother to brother, But when we see somebody that has been active for a while suddenly not, reach out.
Reach out.
Make a point to reach out. And also, when we see new people come in the door you don't recognize, go to them and say hi and welcome them. Because that means more than we can ever. And it's so often overlooked, I think, in our congregations. But I want to leave those two things with you as well. Because I think if somebody had reached out to me, I would have probably turned around,
I love it.
So
thank you. Thank you, Jason. I told you. I said this is different. This is unique. And thank you for sharing that, Jason. I really appreciate it. And shout out to Ed Thatcher. And yes, I'll echo that too. Reach out to people. And I have a name in my head right now of a friend that I'm going to reach out to after we finish filming this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on I followed your podcast for a while now, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you for the opportunity.
No worries. Thank you. So with that, we'd like to thank Brother Jason White for being here with us. If you liked what you hear, share it with someone. If someone has a similar story with Jason, share it with them. It could help them. It could help someone that has left for whatever reason, right? So thank you so much. And please share and subscribe. And our next episode, we're going to record with Jason's parents, and you're going to hear that side of that story too. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, good night.